And now we are joined by two more special guests coming here today to help us celebrate the 200th episode of Two Black Nerds. They're some very close friends of ours. We got Sean Clemmons and DeAnthony Simmons. Not only that,
Yeah.
they're also filmmakers as well. They have a brand new film that they're working on called The Language of Loves. We'll be having an episode coming out really, really soon to talk all about that. So definitely be on the lookout for that interview coming very soon. But before we get there, we got to talk about some business today and talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But before we dive in, man, how you guys doing today? Thank you for coming on.
Doing
Man,
good. I'm excited.
thanks for having us.
Excited.
Yeah, this is been waiting on this combo.
Oh, yes, indeed. There's plenty
Yeah.
to get into. So, as we have been doing with all of our special guests to help us celebrate this 200th episode, we wanted to sort of take a step back and do a deep dive on the MCU, where things are. I think it's definitely it's time to talk about it. It's time to have a conversation about just all the different angles and the things that have been going on with the MCU. Of course, there have been some notable wins, but there's also been some misses. It's been a bit of I think a rough patch for Marvel Studios for the past couple of years. Not a complete failure by any stretch. I mean, still super successful, but not necessarily to the degree of what they used to be. But, before we get into the specific topic that we're going to talk about with you all today, I want to start with just like a quick question and get your immediate sort of reactions and thoughts about your feelings and relationship with the MCU as it stands today. So don't think about, what we got in the first 10 years or so. Where do you stand with the MCU as it is now? If you had to boil it down to a very short, succinct sentence or phrase of words, how would you ultimately describe your relationship with Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Sean, let's start with you. Let's get your thoughts on that.
I would say I am a lifelong fan of Marvel. I won't say they can't do any bad, but I'll just be a lifelong fan. I watch everything that they produce. So
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. D, what about you?
Just keep it to one phrase. I'd say that I'm not as locked in as I once was. I can admit that. Like you said, this. Yeah. That's what I'm gonna say for right now.
Not locked in as we, I asked you to keep it to a phrase, so I'll adhere to
Mm-mm.
that. But I feel that I felt that
Yeah,
like on
yeah.
an emotional level, like it don't feel the same.
It
So
don't.
I
It's yeah. So
I definitely get that. But we want to talk specifically about the tone and the style of the MCU and how it's evolved over the years and where it, sort of currently stands amongst all the different projects that we get. Obviously, phase four, as we know, there were more projects than ever. We got the TV stuff with Disney Plus, we still got the movies, there were animated projects. And so the opportunity for, I guess, tone diversity presented itself now more than ever. And I think it's also important to sort of note that the beginnings of the MCU were very much established by what we saw with the quippiness and the wittiness of a Tony Stark. What made them so successful for such a long time was sort of the comedic elements that were interjected with a very grounded and human story. And I think you can still kind of see some of that in their projects, but as they've grown, as they've gotten bigger, maybe we've gotten a little bit further away from that, and they've gotten a little bit more ambitious, and we're doing all these things with Infinity Stones and space and multiverses. And so, just as sort of like a general question here, what are your feelings about the way the MCU sort of deploys tones throughout their different projects, and some of the challenges that might exist with that, maybe some of the opportunities. What are your overall feelings? D, let's actually start with you on that question. Like, how are you feeling generally about just all the different sort of usages of tones throughout their variety of projects?
yeah. I like that they're trying something different. I will say that, but at the same time, I feel like they're too afraid to break out of the median for certain films that they've done. So if they started a show or started with a movie with some kind of quirky slash comedic tone right away, they usually stick with that for the rest of the series or for that one movie or TV show specifically. I feel like if you break away from that a little bit or try something, at least a little different, it'll help add more to it. I think we're kind of just getting tired. Well, let me not say we. Like I'm speaking personally for myself, but we're kind of getting tired of seeing a lot of the same things. If you see that it isn't working, try switching up just a little bit. And I also think they're afraid to switch something up. So if we can try a little different, it might make me more locked in. I don't know. That's what I'm gonna say. So I'm not sure.
Sean, do you feel like a lot of their projects start to blend in and feel somewhat the same? Like, does that feeling sort of persevere for you as you watch something that something kind of resembles what you've previously seen, sort of making it harder for you to connect to the ultimate, sort of result that you're watching?
Um, Personally, no, but I think I get what other people are saying, and I get how other people can feel the other way. Personally, I will say no. I think there's just one stereotype that the third act Marvel, how they always kind of follow a similar third act, whether it's a movie or a show. I do see that correlation between films easily. It's pretty noticeable, but like in between shows, no, I don't think that they're the same. But I do think the quality of them has decreased. And this is all speculation. Of course, I would never know in my position. I don't know the people at Marvel, but it just feels like the top is too involved. The shows don't feel grounded anymore. And they may even like sometimes the first episode will kind of confuse us and get us, but by the end, you're like, nope, they started here, but they went left. It just doesn't feel grounded anymore. We don't have those stories that are like, like you said, like just maybe a guy and another, like a hero and then a villain, and a villain just don't like the hero. Like, and that's just it. And it's a regular, they don't got to involve the whole city. It's just a feud between these two people, this dude, the villain. Like, it's just not grounded or simple anymore. And I think that's why we don't have like those leaders. Like a lot of those early stories, like of Captain America 1 and Iron Man 1, they're just simple stories. A hero and a villain is grounded. And I feel like they should give directors more space to create that film with less pull strings from the top and less, well, you got to include this and it has to connect to this. Like, no, just let them create that film and figure it out later, because that's how the magic happened earlier. It was just a bunch of films, and then they figured it out later with Avengers. And okay, maybe we can connect it. Sometimes you just got to create something and then connect it later. You can't try and tie it from the beginning. It don't always work.
Got too ambitious.
Yeah, and so I want to investigate that actually, because you brought up something that I think is super interesting about the nature of their early grounded work versus like where they are now. Des, like what's the give and take on that? Because as we progress throughout these stories, I think you naturally want to see that the stakes are increasing. Like we want to feel like, oh, this feels important, this feels big. You get to Thanos, the Infinity, sort of war movie in game. Like you want it to feel like a big thing. We come to phase 4, and they've decided to continue to up the ante, I suppose, in certain respects, especially with the multiverse. But what are the pitfalls in doing that? Like, I think us as fans, we want to see them like explore these weird areas of comics and go to these strange places, but you possibly might be sacrificing that general audience human connection that many people, the masses, might experience with some of those more grounded stories that we got earlier.
Yeah, I think it's hard to connect with anybody when you met them in space, right? Like Iron Man was like, oh, he's grounded, right? Of course, he's this rich billionaire, whatever. We can't relate to him. A lot of us can't relate to him on that level, but he is a man that existed on Earth, on the ground. He was just really smart, right? Cap, boy from around the corner, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of those characters, I think we could relate to again because they gave us a sense of, but when we met them, the stakes were low. And so now, like you said, as we continue to up the ante past phase 3, right? Phase 4 happens, phase 5 happens. It seems like, how can I possibly relate to this character? And I met them in a condition that I feel like I can't relate to. How can I possibly relate to America Chavez and she came from this other universe that I don't know anything about? How can I, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that really is a something difficult to wrap our heads around as we move into this new phase. The only reason, what makes me afraid, I think, in that is even the movies that we have gotten that did try to change the tone a little bit didn't do so great, right? Like even Chloe Zhao with Eternals was like, let's try this a little different. How many times did you laugh in Eternals? It's not a lot of laughing in Eternals. You know what I'm saying? You did laugh a couple times. They got a couple little family, quirks in there, but for real, that's a pretty dark movie for the most part. And nobody really liked, you know what I'm saying? A lot
the
of people
audience
really
rejected
like that movie.
it, right?
The audience rejected it. Multiverse of Madness, it was different. The audience did respond to that movie a little bit better, but there's still a big group of people out there that was like, ooh, I don't know about this Multiverse of Madness. Sam Raimi.
I feel like the casuals don't want it as much, but I feel like the true fans were like, I really liked it. Like, I really liked Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But my brother, he's definitely more of a casual fan. Even though he's seen all the Marvel movies, he's more of a casual enjoyer. He's not going to watch the shows. Like, he was like, I don't know what that was. It wasn't that good. I didn't really like it. I was like, dang, I really enjoyed it.
So I think the movie that kind of broke the MCU, at least in terms of this conversation about tone, was Thor: Love and Thunder. I feel like that was the movie where everybody was like, okay, wait a second now. We want comedy, but god damn it, y'all are doing a little bit too much now. This feels a little bit too silly. But I haven't talked to you guys about it. Sean and D, like, are you fans of Thor: Love and Thunder? Did that movie work for you, or was it kind of a swing and a miss?
I think it was a swing and a miss. Like it was a one-time watch for me. I hate to say that because we go back and try to watch things at least twice to at least catch the things that I may have missed, Easter eggs and all the other things. But it was just, I'm not gonna say so far from the past movies or just the tone that they set before that I was just like, man, I don't know if I can watch it again. Like Thor has been kind of known for doing that, comedic stuff, here and there, but also having that seriousness behind it. And just Love and Thunder, I don't know if it hit the same for me moving forward. So
Did it? It was one of those things that sometimes I think fans and creators get confused when number one does so good that they like try to replicate number two, but they double down on everything good about number one, not realizing that too much of something can make it worse. Mm-hmm. And it was like the reason why we loved what's the director name?
Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi. The reason why we loved his first film so much is because the balance was perfect. The comedic relief was perfect. There is a good serious, there is a good funny, there is a good callback to some things, and there is a great future open and a new world learned, like with everything there in Thor 1. And Thor 2, it seems like they tried to double down on all of it in the comedy. It's like, well, they loved in the first one, let's give them even more of it. And they messed up the balance. They messed up the serious and the funniness there to where it's like, this doesn't even, I definitely see why people who like watch it like, I don't know what the heck I'm watching. It just wasn't balanced. It wasn't well, and it came off as corny in some parts, and it sucks because there were some parts of Thor: Love and Thunder that I did laugh. I was like, that was pretty good, but there's definitely a lot of parts where I was like, all right, wrap it up. It's time to change this because the feel just wasn't there anymore. Like you said, like trying to feel grounded, trying to feel connected to the character, it just wasn't there. That connection wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, it was a risky movie, and I totally agree about the doubling down. That's exactly what they did. And when you take risks like that, like certain things are just not going to work. Like I know for Des and I, because we talked about it, like the screaming goats, fucking hilarious. I just can't.
I laugh every time.
I don't know what it is, but
they're hilarious, bro.
It works for me, but
it was great.
I know a lot of people are very annoyed by it. They're like, yo, why are they just incessantly screaming over and over? Because it carries on for a very long time, and that's obviously like, that's not the only thing within the film. I mean, there's a lot to that movie where it's like, this is a little much. Like we're kind of treading, real thin ice here. And then I think about a series like She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. I don't know if you guys watched that, but that also, tried to strike a balance between, somewhat serious, but mostly comedy. I mean, this is like fourth wall breaking, meant to be a more lighthearted show. And initially in the beginning, it kind of worked for me. And then we get to the middle and I'm like, okay, the Megan Thee Stallion stuff, like that feels a little too corny. Like we're kind of getting into some areas that it feels forced. It feels like they're not as self-aware as I would like them to as I would like to think that they are. And they're kind of doing stuff to, I guess, pander to certain audiences. But I will say conversely, like there has been some serious stuff. We've gotten a very dark movie in Spider-Man: No Way Home. That's a very dark story. You see Aunt May die. You see the journey that Peter 1 goes through in that film, and that's a more mature take on that character. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever by nature is a darker film just due to, the passing of Chadwick Boseman. So those things do exist. I mean, do you still find that there are opportunities to connect on a more mature level? Because we just got to be real about it. Like, as we're adults, we do go to see like things that are, I think, a little bit more relatable from an adult perspective. And obviously these are supposed to be 4-quadrant movies, but do you think that they're satisfying that niche enough, that they're starting to tap into those more mature stories enough for enough people?
Nah, I really don't. Because the thing that always made Marvel so cool is the versatility of it. I think, of course, everybody loves, for the most part, the front facing of Marvel is a little bit more lightheartedness, right? At least in the MCU, right? Comic book wise, it is a little darker. Like mutant stuff gets pretty dark. I don't know if people watch X-Men. You know what I'm saying? Like mutant stuff is actually pretty dark, but everything else does tend to be a little bit more lighthearted. Like the Avengers do tend to have a I don't know, just a little bit more, I guess, Disney feel to them, right? Versus what Justice League always usually had going on. That's why it was always kind of on Cartoon. Cartoon Network always could like sneak in a little bit more of the darker stuff growing up. You know what I'm saying? That's why Justice League exist there. That's why it fit there, because it was always a little bit more darker in tone. And I think Marvel always had the opportunity again to have that versatility of being both dark and light. And it feels like we've just been light for so long, right? A lot of our favorite Marvel films, for the most part, MCU films today are pretty light. Again, we like a decent amount of the dark ones, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the ones we are like your whole family can watch, right? And I think there is potential for Marvel to say, okay, now we have done so much. We've done it, y'all. The light is very much there. We have also dabbled in some darkness. Let's get into some of these darker stories, and also provide some of the lighter ones. Like, it is okay for both to exist, and I think it's just time for Marvel, I think, to recognize that themselves. Like you said, Jordan, be more self-aware about what you have. There's so much source material in Marvel that they have that is dark. That is very dark.
They're scared to
but
go dark. They're
scared, but
scared.
but part of the reason I understand though is because if it happens, what's the reception? Are people going to be, dang, I can't take my son to go see this movie? Well, you know what I mean? I can't take my family to go see this movie. Well, what does the money look like on the Marvel side? And I think that's the problem. But a lot of it is that money piece, right? But I think it is time for them to step into some of these darker pieces of content that they have.
That's what they make movie ratings for. Okay, if we go rated R, don't take your kid to go see it. This is for the grown folks. I'm sorry, Moon Knight could have been much darker. Like, that was way too light, and especially for how they hyped it up too. Talk about, it's gonna be all these crazy fight scenes in this dark show. It really wasn't dark at all, and they ended it in a very Disney Marvel-esque way too. Secret Invasion could have been darker, and it could have been much more grounded. I don't know, like, I feel like we should have connected to Nick Fury way more and told a very much more spy espionage kind of film in that show, and they're not doing it. And it's almost to a point where it's like, I just know they're going to mess up this Deadpool Wolverine movie. Like, how they massacred my boy. Like, I know that. And a lot of people don't realize a lot of the dark Marvel stuff that was there wasn't Disney MCU Marvel. Like, you look at Punisher, you look at Daredevil, you look at those Jessica Jones, they were getting dark. Like, and I mean, dark, but it was a beautiful thing. People loved it. And it's like, now that they're bringing it over to the MCU, I can already from She-Hulk show, I'm like, bro, this Daredevil show is not about to hit like how it needs to hit. Like, and they're going to try and make it fit in their own way. And it's like, maybe oil and water just can't mix. You feel me? Like, if you're not going to stay right by making it dark, don't continue to try and change something that was good. Like, you feel me?
You kind of just unlocked something that I specifically wanted to address specifically about tone. So I'm really glad you just said what you said, because I think we're also in the midst of experiencing some sort of like tonal whiplash and things that are really jarring. For example, the Marvel Netflix shows, when you see Wilson Fisk Kingpin pop up in Hawkeye, and he's not the Kingpin that you remember from the Daredevil series. This is like a different Kingpin. He's wearing the more traditional,
smashing heads in with the car door.
Exactly. And now he's getting his ass whooped easily by Kate Bishop and Echo. Like, it's not a thing. And so
he's throwing dudes across a grocery store. Man, I'm like, bro,
Kingpin, he was harder into the Spider-Verse.
He was, absolutely. And so I'm just like, I'm wondering like what effect that also has like on the audience. Like, as people who watch those shows, you know, D, like what do you think about like seeing something like that where it's like a character you've grown to know and have this relationship with, and you have the anticipation and the excitement, like, oh, they're bringing Kingpin back, like he's going to raise hell like he used to. And then you see him and it's not quite that way. Does that make you also sort of fearful of the future with like some of these other characters that might get integrated into future stories?
It does, actually, because it's like Kingpin, great example. Like you said, you just brought this character in from a very known show. He was a very known character. He had his own kind of shtick to him already. Why not take that same thing and bring it to the new show? If you knew that it worked so well for him in this very first show, and you take him to this new show and you completely take that away, you just took away everything good about the character. That's essentially eliminating the whole point of you bringing him over. I think with these next few characters, the next few movies and film or TV shows that are coming out, they're going to do the same thing. And I hope that they don't, for one. Again, with the Daredevil one, I really hope that they stick to the same framework, but I know they're not going to. they're going to make it a little bit more campy. They're going to take away the darkness. He's not, like Sean said, he's not bashing no heads no more. Like, if anything, they're going to censor a lot of stuff. And I'm really scared of. I wanted to mention this earlier about the Blade one that's coming out here recently, or soon too. I don't know how that's gonna look because the Blade that we know,
that movie's not real. I'm just convinced that's not a
I
real.
haven't
That movie's
seen
not coming out,
anything,
bro.
nothing from it, man.
Yeah, but no, you're right though.
So it's scary. At least
I'd like to also add to that point of why things like this and being dark is extremely important in storytelling is because, as we all know, in comics and even in the Spider-Verse film, Kingpin was huge, and in comics, Kingpin was always this huge brooding figure, which in live action with practical effects isn't always something that's easy to do. They didn't have a very big person playing Kingpin, but the sense of Kingpin in any scene was almost like he was this huge brooding figure that was like people were almost intimidated and scared of.
It's
and
his
that,
presence
like,
and his aura.
Yes, a presence and aura was there. That was like when Kingpin's on film, on screen, when you see him, you fear him. Like he was, and they didn't even need him throwing a person 50 feet. No, when he was just beating somebody up just the physical strength, it was like, no, this dude is not somebody you mess with. And they took that side of it away, making it so much lighter, and tried to switch it in with like, oh, well, we gonna show him like throwing somebody and taking all these hits and throwing them all the way across the room. It's like, no, that didn't work. Like you just shedded away all of what made him this dark, big character and try to feed us in with some. Like you try to switch frosted flakes out with cornflakes and think we wouldn't notice. Like, no, we know what you're doing. No, it doesn't work the same. Like it just doesn't.
Yeah, it's a lot of power in the way you just shoot something and how you film it. And I've been very critical of how they film certain things, but the way that they used to film Kingpin in those Netflix shows, like you say, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but the way you just place the camera and how you look at him and how you observe him in a scene, it adds a lot of value to what you're trying to accomplish in terms of conveying that sense of scale and size and intimidation, as you pointed out.
Shout out Vincent D'Onofrio.
Right, exactly, for doing all the work there. Des, I want to ask you this: like, what are the missed opportunities here if they don't really go down these paths? I think we see on the DC side of things, or they've had their challenges. I think we can all obviously acknowledge that, but they have had successful director auteur driven takes on things that are completely dissimilar to what we see from Marvel and maybe even some other DC projects. Matt Reeves with the Batman, Todd Phillips with the Joker, like. It almost feels like movies like that would never be possible in the MCU. Do you think that there's a missed opportunity by not just completely leaning into somebody as a director coming in and saying like, you know what? I don't want to connect this at all. Like, yes, it could be in the MCU technically, but we're not incorporating any MCU elements. We're going to create a different style and tone. Like, is that just like an untapped area of potential that they're not really, sort of leaning into at this point?
Man, I think so. I really do, because we've just seen again those numerous opportunities again on the DC side of them just kind of killing that, man. The Todd Phillips, the Matt Reeves, those by themselves are like, okay, Marvel. To be honest, like Marvel, just one experiment. You know what I'm saying? Like, can we do this one time? James Gunn Suicide Squad, bruh. It's like, can we do this one time? And to be honest, I think we do see glimpses of that brilliance, right? Of like. Part of me feels like they kind of gave that feeling to what Ryan Coogler did in the first Black Panther, right? Part of me feels like they did, like they were like, Ryan Coogler, go do your thing, and he did his thing, And it feel like it doesn't happen enough though, because how often are you watching some of these Marvel films, and it feels like you are watching a Ryan Coogler film. I don't know. A lot of times I feel like I'm watching an MCU movie, not a film directed by the director. Does that make sense?
It does, because the recent She-Hulk showrunner. Or not She-Hulk, no, Nia DaCosta, actually, who's directing the Marvels. I don't know if you guys saw it, but she just released those comments and she said, I had a wonderful time making this movie, but it's very much a Kevin Feige production. Like this is not necessarily a director-driven movie. So I think that's kind of like what you're speaking to there.
Absolutely. And I think that's a problem, right? Versus like, I don't know. It's just an issue. Like, I feel like too much puppet hand. And then it feels like we need to, again, just take some directors that we know and love, and Marvel needs to do an experiment. Let some of these directors have their own vision. Take a property and go make something Marvel. And if it's good, figure it out later. Like we just talked about. Figure it out later how to incorporate it to the other things that we love. Because I do think the thing is about the Batman and Joker and Suicide Squad, those are all very dark things. But it's because a lot of the directors that take them on like darker stories as well. And so I think there is opportunity there for them to have some properties like that within the MCU, but they have to do the experiment. I have to watch a MCU film and be like, dang, this was like a director featuring MCU versus MCU featuring a director. And I think that would change a lot because when I watch Guardians, I'm like, yeah, this is a James Gunn movie. You feel it. You know what I'm saying? Some of these in-between movies,
so well.
Movies, I don't feel it. I can't watch Captain Marvel and feel like I'm watching, you know what I'm saying, the movie of the director. I can't watch some of these other films and feel like I'm watching even some of the ones we love feel like that to me though, right? Even some of our favorite MCU films, it's like, I really love this movie, but at the end of the day, it kind of just feels like an MCU movie still, as much as I love it. I feel like that with even, I don't know, Winter Soldier even. I love Winter Soldier, but it still feels like, dang, this is an MCU movie. It's a great one, and I love it, but I don't know. It's something about some of those directorial takes that we could feel more in some of these other MCU films.
To that point, Des, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I'll let you. I was going to say, to that point, the beauty of making a film that doesn't necessarily connect, or that you might not say, like, it doesn't connect to the MCU, that, like, you could say it's not connected to the MCU and make a film that's completely different. And people don't realize that adds to the popularity and the shock later when they are integrated. So you can make this film and it's literally not connected to the MCU at all. It just is created and exists in its own world, in its own city, and a very grounded hero villain story. And then like everybody's gonna be like, oh, that's just the MCU movie that exists, and don't connect it to the MCU. But maybe 5-6 movies down the line, if they're brought into a bigger movie, when that person pops up on screen, everybody's not going to be expecting. They're like, oh snap, this person's here, because the demand of having their own film and thinking it exists in its own world is what brings it. That's why everybody was so stoked when Avengers came out, because they're like, wait a minute, everybody from their own movies is coming together now. Like, what? We need to get back to having individual movies that don't connect. Like, if it's not connected, great. We're like, oh, that just exists. So later down the line, when it does come in, we're now surprised again. Now we have this already preconceived notion that everything's already connected, so we know what's happening. It's like we know it. We're tired of that shtick.
Right.
So go ahead.
Oh,
man.
my bad. I just had a quick question, if anything. So, do you think that if Marvel decided to try the same dark tone, essentially that DC is doing, but in an animated sense first, do you think that would warrant them to try to do it in an actual like an actual movie? Because DC does so well within the animated series and movies in terms of their darkness, feel, and their tone. So I don't think I've seen any Marvel movie kind of copy or do the same thing with that same kind of tone. Do you think if they did that, it would be easier for them to kind of transition into doing it with live action if it does, or if it's received well, just like the DC's?
Anybody got thoughts on that? Because I'm sitting there like, that is something that I've wanted them to do, was to be a little bit more experimental with that piece of it. But I mean, the one thing about DC's animation is it's just much more robust, than what Marvel is producing. They've been doing that for, like 30 plus years. And so that's kind of baked into their philosophy. They're super good.
They're so good at it. Oh man, they're so good.
But, I do think, naturally what we see out of these comic characters, they lend so much of themselves to animation. Like there's just such an intrinsic connection just because of the art style and the artwork. Exactly. And so what harm would there be in possibly testing out some things, maybe in one medium, and then seeing how they can be translated into another medium later down the road? And they've done it in comics. Like Marvel as a company has definitely test run stuff in comics and stories before they eventually make their way to the big screen, so I think from a movie perspective, it seems like they're trying to get there, with this new animation division with like the what ifs, and they're bringing, the X-Men stuff in there. But I don't know. I think that they kind of have a long road to go, because now the bar has just been raised so significantly high with animation, especially when you're getting stuff like Spider-Verse coming out from Sony. It's like, oh, well, if we're not coming with that type of energy, it's like, well, what are we doing? And not everything is going to be across the Spider-Verse, like by no means, but I do think that there's a lot of untapped potential there. I do want to quickly play devil's advocate though, because a lot of what's been said has been about, you know, the limitations and not taking risks, and you know, many of these projects feeling like they're not director driven and they're more so Kevin Feige or MCU productions. But I think the other side of that coin is that, you know, it's worked. It's worked for a really long time. That's why they are so successful, is because there is one man who has a vision, who's been guiding the ship. Obviously, there's directors and producers and his team that he works with, but he is undoubtedly the leader and the person steering that ship. And it's been pretty Teflon for a real long time until now. I think we started to see the cracks. So, I mean, what do you say to that? What's the balance of that look like versus, you know, what it's been? Because everything up until this point has been largely driven by what he's wanted to achieve. What room is there to possibly, you know, maybe take the foot off the gas a little bit and maybe allow a little bit more leeway for some filmmakers to just kind of do something and play in that sandbox and bring it to life however they see fit?
It's needed. It's very much so needed. Like, you got to realize when Marvel was at the top of their game, it was at the top of their game. Like, it was a moment in life when Infinity War was like the Infinity Saga, like that in Endgame, when that was out, it was like almost like the whole world was kind of like stopping, like, hey, don't say nothing. If you hadn't seen it and it was like Friday and people wouldn't go see it Thursday and they were talking about, like, it was almost fighting words. Like, it was very much so top of the game. And I think since they were so high up and it was so good, and they had people binging movies, not binging a show series, binging movies to go see this final movie. They were at the top of the game. I think you kind of have to get broken down to get back to that point. And it was never going to stay up there. It was never going to go even higher. That was their peak. You can't stagnate at a peak. You got to get broken down to come back up again. So it's like, I trust the process. That's why I said I'm a lifelong fan in the very beginning. I said, because I still watch everything they put out. If they put out, guess what? They're rushing. Guess what I'm watching this weekend? Loki. I'm going to watch it with my girlfriend. Sit down. So it's like, I get why they're at the height that they're at. And I guess you just kind of got to get broken down. It works, and I believe it's going to start coming up again eventually.
I hope so. I think we need it. We definitely need the eventual ascension again. But perhaps that is just what it is. It's a franchise and a company really that intends to be around for a long time. I mean, no franchise has ever just maintained all of its popularity all the time. You know, James Bond had a dip. You know, Lord of the Rings is kind of experiencing a dip. Harry Potter isn't really doing anything right now, but maybe it'll have a moment 5 years from now. You know, everybody sort of ebbs and flows, and perhaps Marvel, even though they're still putting stuff out, they're just kind of in that stage of like, all right, this isn't the moment, but we can potentially get back there. And I think we all just kind of want to see them hopefully get back there and achieve a lot of what they used to. Before we get out of here, I want to ask two very important questions as we wrap up, specifically for our guests, Sean and D. Firstly, what would you do to fix the MCU? Obviously, there is a lot that is, you know, sort of, I guess, wrong with it. I guess things that many of us would try to improve, but what would ultimately be your vision, your guiding light to get them back in a place of I guess just true success of what we used to associate with them? If you could have, you know, a lunch meeting or a presentation with Kevin Feige, you know, what would you be telling him to get him back on the right path so that they can experience that success? D, let's start with you and get your thoughts on that.
Got you. So two things come to mind first when you say that. The first being, get back to the basics. Start back in the beginning. Let's find more relatable characters. I think that's been our main driving point throughout this whole conversation. If anything, let's get back to the basics. Find more relatable characters. I understand we got a lot of people just out here in space. We have people who come from different universes. Let's try to find some. There's a bunch of heroes. Let's find somebody else that's still on Earth that, you know, can be a leader, something. At least just tell us their story for a little bit and then build back up like you did before. That's one. Second, try to change the tone. Like, let's try a little bit more dark movies. Like we've said, Marvel has a bunch of different dark stories that you can use. I'm not saying you have to use a story, but there is a story. You know, Deadpool kills the Marvel universe. You don't have to use that, but there are stories that are that dark that you could lean into within Marvel too. Just give one of them a try. Whether it doesn't have to be live action, like we said before, animation. Just test something different, please, because I think it'll turn out good. So that's what I would say.
Sean, what about you?
I would, as a project manager going in to overhaul the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I would sit down with Kevin and tell him,
Is that a paid
First of
position?
all-
Like, is that on LinkedIn right now? Can we go?
I don't know.
Look that up.
He's definitely gonna be like, I have a meeting right now. Where's my secretary at? Kind of what DeAnthony said, similar. Get back to the basics. I would definitely revoke Kevin Feige's input on movies. I'm sure he has way too much input in movies and films. I would tell them no more shows for the next 2 years. Let's do films and new characters that are not connected in any way. I'm tired of this soft rollout with shows with characters. Like they're soft rolling out characters who might get a film, see how the crowd feels if we drop a show first, or they show up as a new character in somebody else's show or in somebody else's movie, and then they roll out. No, stop that. Give us a new character with their own film. Make us go watch it from the beginning, how it always is. Like, stop with the twos and threes. The next 2-3 years, no second or third films and no characters that have already been introduced. Like, there are so many more characters that we could learn from in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the people who are like, well, we don't care about these characters. I want people to realize Iron Man in the very beginning, like before Robert Downey Jr. made Iron Man what it was, like he was a B-grade superhero at best, in my opinion. Like, I'm sorry, but like people just wasn't talking about Iron Man like that. Like, at least not as much as some others is like, the X-Men comics or Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man, of course, is in his own level, but everybody who we know and love today was built to be that level. Like Iron Man, I can say is an A-grade character now, like hero, because everybody like knows him, of course, from the movies. It's become that much bigger. And I feel like let's get back to these characters we don't know. Let's give them a film and build them up from ground zero. Stop this soft rolling, like trying to roll. The shows would have been great right before Infinity War, but you giving us shows now, it's like we got to get back to the basics. You giving us all the. It feel like in anime when we're watching canon or when we're watching filler. All these shows feel like filler. We want canon. We want stuff that feels good. That's telling a story that we know can mean something, and that's just not what they've really been doing. At least in my opinion, that would be my project management's feel. I would give Kevin Feige.
Oh man.
As I'm getting dragged out by security.
That he might look at you like you're crazy and say, all right, go down the street to Warner Brothers and try to pitch that. Don't come here to Disney talking that shit. But no, I like it. I like the radical change. I like the ideas and just what could be there. Final question for you guys. What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to, like on the horizon in terms of an upcoming film? It could be a TV show, it could be a special, it could be a rumored project. Hell, it could even be a project that they have not announced, but you want to ultimately see it come to life in the MCU someday. Like, what are you actually looking forward to over the next few years for Marvel? Sean, let's actually start with you on this one.
I am excited, even though I'm losing excitement for the Blade film, only because it keeps getting pushed back. But I'm hoping it's getting pushed back for the right reasons. I will say that. I hope it's getting pushed back for a reason. Of course, the strike and everything going on, I get that. But I'm hoping they don't waste the talent that they have with Mahershala Ali, with the film it's going. Very excited for that. Also excited to watch Loki this weekend. I mean, Loki season 1 was great. I love Tom's character in the whole show, so I'm definitely excited to view that. Iron Wars, kind of excited for that.
Okay.
Just because I want to see how they're going to integrate what they just did to Rhodey and how they're going to bring Riri in from Black Panther. I want to see how that's going to work. Not really sure there. I'm interested to see it, but yeah, I would say those are the main things I'm excited for.
Fair enough. D, what about you?
A lot of the same. So of course, the Blade movie, whenever that does end up dropping, Loki coming out this weekend. The Wolverine and Deadpool movie, whenever that decides to come out, and I have high expectations for that. I don't want to set them too high, but we'll see how it turns out and how it plays. They've been doing Deadpool a great, in my opinion. Well, let me say Ryan Reynolds. He's been doing phenomenal with Deadpool. So let's just say that there. And I know there's no talks of it at the moment, but any Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland coming out, I really enjoy Tom Spider-Man. So whenever they decide to bring him back, and then the story that they decide to continue after No Way Home. I want to.
It's not coming for a while, buddy. I'm gonna let you know.
I know it's not. I know.
He's tired of Spider-Man. He's not coming back for a minute.
He's taking a. He is. He's taking. He's definitely taking.
He said he was tired. Tomorrow said he was tired of playing Spider-Man.
But when he comes back, I'm gonna be right there. I'm gonna be there day one. But that's what I'm excited for right now.
I don't blame young Tom. That man was playing that character nonstop for like 7 years. You know, it's a grind for sure. So he definitely deserves the time off. And he got Bay on his side, which is, you know, take that time. Take that time, Tom. Take that time you need. Do what you got to do, man.
I see you, nephew.
Sure. Also, that Deadpool and Wolverine film. There's rumors it might be like Deadpool kills the whole Fox kind of thing.
I love to hear it.
Because they recently, the dude who played Sabretooth, he was brought that he's going to be in the film now. Like, they got some people in there who is in there. Jennifer Garner that they said they're going to be in there. I'm like, if they manage to pull that off, if they keep the rated R and they make it really dope, it could be like Wolverine and Deadpool kill the Fox. That would be pretty dope.
They might bring it back.
Yeah. There's definitely
that chance. Hopefully they take that chance.
I hope so.
Please.
Yeah.
The Marvel guys, please.
Please. As you're getting escorted out of the Marvel offices, you're asking for a lot there, but hopefully so, man. Definitely got the high hopes for Deadpool, so we will see hopefully shortly when that movie comes out. But Sean and D, man, thank you guys so much for coming on the Two Black Nerds today to help us celebrate our 200th episode and to talk about the MCU. Before we let you go, let the good people know where they can find you. Y'all got a movie that's coming out soon at some point in the future that y'all are working on that we're talking about in a future episode, but let the people know what y'all got going on and where they can find you on social.
Yeah, so you can catch our film, The Language of Loves, coming out early 2024. All of our social media is The Language of Loves. You can check out our website, The Language of Loves Film. You can check me out on social media, Sean_on_the_moon. That's with 2 zeros in moon. And that's pretty much on every social media as well. Check us out, interact with us, or just argue with us on the TL.
Sure. Following that, Sean had just said a lot of pretty much all the socials for the Language of Love. So definitely check those out. My personal socials are _D Simmons on Instagram, and for Twitter, it's at Cypher Gaming, at CYPHXR Gaming. So that's where you can find me at.
Amazing. Well, guys, thanks again so much for coming on today to help us bring in 200. And I still got a grudge against y'all for what y'all used to do a few years ago. The homies, don't think I forgot about that. Some very, very bad days on Twitter on Fridays.
Y'all were committing sins.
Y'all
was committing sins, boy.
Y'all had some moments there. I'm gonna take care of that another time. We're gonna say that for outside of the celebration. We'll have y'all back again soon and talk about it.
You gotta realize it's 5 very opinionated people. That's all I'm gonna say.
Because y'all was
I
wild.
wasn't agreeing sometimes.
Wait, the thing is, they would leave me out to dry every Friday to argue on the TL by myself too.
You were the one managing everything.
I was the only one fighting back,
taking all the heat on socials because people was coming for y'all for sure after them lists would drop. But no, again, pleasure having y'all here. We're gonna catch up again soon with you guys.
Thank you. Y'all take it easy. Love you guys. Peace.
Appreciate it.